And we'll see how it goes. It's just got a project. You know. I don't know. Now, we're leaving for that other side.
That's us.
Percent.
We're live if you give me just a second.
So they track that too. And who's this PMO? Same thing.
Oh, I have my.
Oh, good. I had them look into it.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 9th committee of the whole meeting from Millburn School District 24. If we can have a roll call.
Ms. Fox, Mr. Coleman,
Present.
Mr. Gouzier,
Here.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Federer. Ms. Roberts. Here.
Please stand for the pledge. The pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Doesn't look like we have any public comment. Does anyone have any additions to our agenda?
The update on the investments.
I reached out to Dr. Johns because he'll be the one that would be responsible for providing that information, to the board, and he is working on it, but I don't have a specific date on
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
I'll follow up with him again.
We'll put it in future agendas and. that we won't forget about it. Information and discussion on the board policies. Does anybody have any of these policies that they want to take a closer look at?
Just, there are three, and just for, really for awareness and then questions, just to make sure we already have some of these things that are being called out. So we can look at four, sorry, let's start with 265. I was actually looking at the proposed one. Sorry, updated policy. And if we go down to the definitions of sexual harassment. Right there, sorry,
No,
just
that's
two
good.
lines up. You go, yep, right there, so examples of sexual harassment. My only comments here are, we need to be real careful about what resources we have in the library, because inclusive here are pictures, discussions of sexual experiences, and there were books, not in our library, but books that were recently discussed in many other districts that actually discuss sexual experiences and have pictures and things that could be considered crude. And so we just have to be careful that if we have this, we're not facilitating sexual harassment by having any resources in the library that could be used as such. That's all on this one. Other than that, I don't really have any other observations on here that I think is concerned.
Thank you.
So there's that one. The next is 4165. Again, the updated policy. Just a few observations here. They talk about training, and they actually put a date on training, saying that everyone must be trained by January 31st. I don't know if we want to have a date defined.
I believe we do because it's code.
Okay,
So if I go back, that's a good question and very relevant because we're trying to make sure everybody's trained now because we're getting audited on February
Yeah.
4th.
Yeah,
So, let me pull up the press because
so I just thought, yeah, so if there's a date defined, rather than saying within X number of
Right.
weeks of starting school, you know what I mean?
Yep.
January 31st, I mean, that's half the year done. So I think just having a date is kind of restricted there.
so the
Okay.
reference number 10,
And,
citations,
but is that specifically for the date, or is it just
I'm pretty
reference
sure it
to
is.
training?
I'd have to look up these. Usually it says right in here that this would be according to code. I
Yeah.
believe it is because it's in our compliance document that we
Yeah.
have to show evidence that we have done it
Yeah.
by that. And they give school districts that
Okay,
cushion.
okay. All right, I just didn't want it to be too
It's a good question.
restrictive.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
All right, information, handbooks. Provide information or slash instruction in handbooks within 5 days of written notice. Talking about the instruction. Deadlines for instruction. Again, these are just observations, making sure that if we have these things in the policy that we don't paint ourselves in the corner.
Which one was that, Sean?
That is for 4165, sorry.
Oh. okay.
Yeah.
Same one.
Talking about instruction.
Are you talking?
And if we're going to provide instruction, there must be 5 days notice prior to providing instruction
Yeah,
there.
we do that.
So that's
We have a
that's
letter.
standard, right? We already have that. It's just things, okay.
Yep.
Okay, and then just counseling and resources for those students affected by abuse. I would assume that we already have that in place, and it says consistent with policy 7250. So I would just think that if we adopt this in full, that we would want to make sure that we do have counseling and services available consistent with 7250. I think go up, yeah. Couple more, there you go. Oh, you just did it.
There,
There. Okay. So we're compliant with this, right? Okay,
so, yeah, what happens after a visit is, sometimes there'll be references or referrals to a social worker.
Mhm.
If a student discloses something to a teacher or a friend or principal, administrator, anybody in the building, could be a board member, then we would refer them to
okay,
social worker council.
okay. All right, thank you.
And our social workers also refer out often to community services too. There's other counseling services and we'll try to make everybody aware what those possible
Okay,
services are.
thank you. And then there's just one other question that I had, and we talked about this in the past. It's 7285.
Okay.
And it's talking about maintaining a supply of epinephrine. Remember, there was issues with trying to get EpiPens, and while we would want to do that, you know, supply is sometimes restrictive, and,
We do have epinephrine,
uh-huh,
and even if we don't, we are allowed to use someone else's in an emergency. So
so should we make sure that's in there? It does say that we maintain a supply, yeah, yeah, there you go. Implements and maintain number 3. Yep. Implements and maintains a supply of undesignated epinephrine.
Yeah.
So that covers,
we're able to do that with EpiPens. I
okay,
had a question with Narcan and some other,
uh-huh,
and that's not in here. That was in a different
right,
policy where I was a little uncomfortable saying, we're gonna have all these drugs on
right.
hand
Right.
to get them, but
And-
epinephrine, we're definitely okay.
Okay, okay, that's all. I just wanted to make sure that we were able to comply with that.
Good questions and comments. Any others or?
No, that was it at the first reading. I might take a look at a couple, but I think there's nothing there that's really concerning.
So I'd like to point out one,
Okay,
and just as a FYI. This one has a lot of superintendents
Mhm.
chattering a little bit in
okay,
the area. So for student fees. In the second paragraph, fees for textbooks, other instructional materials and driver education, as well as fines for the loss or damage of school property are waived for students who meet the eligibility criteria for a waiver as described in this policy. So students that qualify for free or reduced lunch, no fees, fines, or loss or damaged property. The law states loss. This is new. This is a new law. This policy goes further to say damage. And their rationale for going further to say loss or damage is, let's use iPad as an example, because that's probably going to be our most common
mhm,
lost or damaged and most expensive. If a student cracks a screen. And it's a damage and we have fines for damage. But if they lose it, there's no fines. They will lose it every time in that case. I mean, it just makes sense. So they're saying in order to get as many back as possible, even if they're damaged, there won't be a penalty for damages. Or a book, let's say you drop the book in the sink, which happens, or the dog pees on the book, which happens, or they're outside, they left the book on the porch and it rained. Now the book is, that social studies book was this thick and now it's this thick. Well, we have to lose that book. It's no longer good. In the past, we charged parents, even if we were on free and reduced lunch, we would charge parents, and now that's not the case. So I just want to
are we
point that
required to have?
the loss is the law.
Mhm.
Damage was added in order to ensure that there are more losses than.
That's their theory. We can choose not.
I mean, it does make sense. Like if someone is concerned about paying $50 swim fee versus not paying anything, just not returning that bag. I understand. what you're saying.
Well, I think our only real reason for having a fine is so that they don't intentionally lose their stuff.
Right.
It happens. It's really hard to put into the regulation, how to do that.
Yeah, how do you measure intent?
Yeah.
We'd all love to help somebody who fumbles and accidentally drops it once. Now, sometimes, some people have a lot of accidents, and I'm not just talking students, staff, but my kids happen to have accidents once in a while. It happens. But, were they treating it with the respect that they should? Were they taking care of it? Was it out of outside of the protective case? Kids pick at we used to lose keyboards constantly. Before we had the solid ones that we have now, the ones you guys have now, I think you can't pick on the keyboards because the kids would absentmindedly just pick away and pop the keys off. That becomes a problem. Or some kids were mad and popped the keys off. But either way, we lost a lot of keys and keyboards. Not theirs.
That'd be bad. He's gonna blow a fuse if it works.
Well, my opinion is that you had to be intentional to lose keys on a keyboard. But
Okay.
So that's, I understand the intent behind, I mean, I don't want kids who can't afford to pay. We don't want them to not have the materials. And so that everybody understands, but this opens itself for how do we collect? And we have, as a district, we have very little leverage to collect anything. Very little. We can't withhold diplomas, we can't withhold grades, can't withhold report cards, or reports. There's virtually nothing we can do to collect, which makes it a challenge for us. We are fortunate to live in a district where we collect 99% of our fees, typically, sometimes a little less, but most people do pay eventually. But it's, so, I just want to point out. And it is a challenge, and we work hard, business office works hard to collect as much as possible. Because if we don't, then that does impact us directly on our ability to offer.
Is there any way you could say 2 strikes or 3 strikes or something?
There's restrictions we can put on eventually, so if a student continues to lose an iPad.
They only get to use one in school?
Yeah, we
Okay.
keep it at school.
Okay. Is that something?
So this goes to we have a protection plan. So our protection plan is worded as such that parents will ask me, well, I paid for the protection plan, why do I also have to pay again when my screen is cracked? Or when I lost the iPad and I already paid for the protection plan? But yes, but if we just replaced it, then there's again no consequences for, and again, hard to determine intent, but there's no consequences for damaging something or losing it. If someone keeps losing an iPad and they didn't have to pay for it, well, pretty soon, Cousin Tim has an iPad in Texas.
So if there's no financial consequence, and that's not enforceable because of law, are there any other consequences that can be defined for repeated incidences?
I don't know,
I don't know.
other than not being able to take one home.
Yeah.
So we'd restrict access and have, we'd supply them with at school, but they would be able to take the.
How would that then impact us giving them a proper education?
Could be argued at some point.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be a problem.
Denying services.
Denying services, and access, they're a seventh grader that's broken it once a year since 3rd grade, and finally say, stop it, and then they can't do homework.
It would sound like an incentive to bring in. How big of an issue is this? How many?
We'll find out. I don't think it's gonna be a big issue for us, but
I mean,
I just wanted to
how,
make,
how many iPads do we use usually a year? 3, 2?
Jake, do you know? Lose or break?
Yeah, why not, both?
This defines damage and loss.
However,
I can
however
check
we
on
would
it.
define it according to the policy.
What's that?
What's a blue rule law?
Yeah, very seldom do we lose them because we can ping them
The basement ones? Handful? Basement.
10, 20.
5, 10.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely more of a.
Is that for school or total?
Right.
So 10 total for a year between the 2 schools.
Maybe 20 between the school.
So we don't have any latitude on this first sentence though. That's law, right?
Yeah, we can take out damage.
Yeah, okay.
No, there's still,
Policy should encourage desirable behavior, right? And that's why, and I've said this before, is that these policies are becoming more and more restrictive. And And in this particular instance, there's less ability for the district to encourage behavior. Desired behavior.
Well, I agree. And it, to me, it goes in, it's in a bigger societal picture, a lack of trust with your local district. And I'm sure somebody abused this at some point and that let, to some degree, that let kids participate in education, or it caused some sort of a problem for somebody, and that's why we have policy. That's how laws get written for.
Or didn't abuse it.
Or very narrow. Usually gets written for a very narrow
Yeah.
issue, but then it impacts.
It's another example of unfortunate to be a building.
Yeah. I understand the intent. Yeah, I agree. It's
So,
kind of an unfunded mandate.
okay, so if I'm a student and I broke my screen, there's that insurance policy, what does that do?
It cuts your screen cost in half. So if it costs us $100 to replace the screen, you only have to pay 50.
And we're asking the parents to kick in that 50.
Yeah.
And that's for,
Even though they already paid 20 for the policy.
Could we raise the?
But it's like car insurance.
oh,
you
yeah,
have a
sure,
deductible.
we got a deductible.
Could we raise the policy?
The amount of but we can't collect it.
Thing.
You mean
It's not limited to just you.
You mean raise the, like, the initial?
Yeah.
Check out the policy?
$40 we could,
I think it's 30.
what's 30?
No, they went down to 20 last year.
Okay.
It was 30, you're right.
Yeah. But even so that. We would serve with. And to. Essentially cover.
Okay, so it seems like we're talking about an awful small sample. Because if there's 20 broken screens, what is it? 10 families will send in the $50.
But this is just limited to this particular example.
Well, yeah,
It's much broader.
Yeah, and I think it's covering a hypothetical, because at this point, there are incentives in place potentially to deter losing or damaging that item. But within the policy update, essentially doing away with those incentives to take care of your items. So people tend to be a little bit more, I mean, just like as a whole, if we know that there's no consequence involved, by nature, sometimes we know it's, so it's not saying it will happen, but I think that everyone is kind of looking at like the hypothetical, like, will this change the way people view school property?
Agreed. My thought is, I'll get some data at the end of this year, and then some data at the end of next year, see if it's changed.
I don't think your average elementary, middle school person cares whether they pay a damage waiver or not. They don't think, the parents do.
Parents did.
But the kids don't.
Yeah.
The kids are not thinking, I gotta take better care of this, because I gotta save $30. They're thinking, I don't wanna get in trouble.
Yeah, you're trusting that the parents.
Well, and I was gonna say,
Parents.
I was gonna say, I was the incentive when my child was here to not damage or lose the thing, so. That's not universal.
It's not always.
So potentially just for these, and again, I know it's limited here, but we're talking $500 maybe a year.
Yeah, it's not.
But
Again,
but then you
I'll
said
track,
there's books and other,
we'll track it and see if it's. it's a big deal. I don't think it will be as much, but it did cause some eyebrow raising, some chatter.
And I would imagine,
Probably the business managers as well.
yeah, I would imagine it's very different based on the district.
$500 next year.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions or comments about any of these policies? So we'll vote to approve them on the next meeting. Administrator and teacher salary benefit report.
So this is another report, another salary report that school districts are required to submit. This one's through what's called the EIS, so the Employee Information System. There's throughout the year a series of different reports that we are required to provide to the state. One of them is the administrator and teacher salary benefit report. So there's no action that's needed on this, just as FYI. It's posted to our website, it's out there, and it gets submitted to the state.
Thanks, Carly.
Then the annual review of closed session minutes and destruction of audio tapes more than 18 months old.
Okay, so each of you has a packet of closed session minutes. Those are all the minutes that remain currently closed. On the top, there's a suggestion with a couple of notes on which ones I think can be opened up. If they have, if they refer to a student or identifiable, even if it doesn't say a student's name, it's identifiable with the scenario. Probably a good idea to keep those closed. And or if it has to do with teacher discipline, that also by law has to stay closed. So other than that, we can open them up. And I have notes on there, so just look them over. If you have any questions, let me know before the next meeting, and then if there's, at the next meeting, you can open, close, make other suggestions or alterations to that recommendation. So that's fine, and, just let me know.
Is there a time limit for how long the records say of a
Nope.
teacher? It's indefinite?
Until it's no longer relevant. Like
Okay, it's kind of a broad.
50 years from now. If someone has passed away or,
Are those records, can they be subpoenaed if they have to?
it can be subpoenaed, a judge can open up a closed record.
Okay.
But they can't be for you.
It cannot be closed.
Thanks.
Any other thing? Property tax.
Property tax relief grant, this is good news. Hopefully, if this, actually happens, that would be a huge relief for our taxpayers. What it would do, I just ran some real basic numbers. If we did it for taxpayers, for those, well, all of us, almost all of us pay taxes, we would almost be flat next year with our taxes. It'd go up a little bit. Our property taxes, because we would abate, the district would abate back to our families $800 and some odd $1,000. And the state would replace that with 700 and 717.
893 or 895.
Eight, there's a, yeah, about 170 some million, 170 some $1,000 gap between those two. So we would have to dip it, if, you know, anticipating that our budget's gonna be tight again next year, we would have to dip into our reserves 170 some $1,000, which we definitely have, and would be wise to do so, because we would have to do that for 2 years, and our taxpayers would next year be almost flat from this year, which we were gonna see a huge jump if you recall, because we're levying 5% plus that last bond payment still there. So that it was gonna be a big jump. Our taxpayers won't see that big jump next year. The following year, we would abate again $800,000, so it'd go, we'd lose the $5 million bond payment. And the 800,000 go down significantly.
Fantastic.
We wouldn't notice
Yeah.
that on our tax bills, which would be lovely. Then the following year, that third year out, then we don't abate taxes. That 700,000 that we got from the state goes into our base funding minimum. As long as they don't mess with things, that goes in perpetuity as our base funding minimum. Until they change the law, which hopefully is never, but. So that would be great for our taxpayers, and then we can levy again, because we wouldn't be abating that. We wouldn't be getting any more replacement, we could then levy the full amount again, so our taxpayers would see a big jump in that year. Not, actually not that big, but significant increase in that year, but it would still be far less than what this year is. So we'd be going way down, or way down, a little bit down or flat, and then a little uptake, but we'd still be well below where they're at. And the district would be getting more money. But essentially what the state's trying to do is replace property taxes with state taxes for those districts like ours that are high tax districts. Because right now, we are ranked number 25 out of 860 school districts as the highest tax burden for local taxpayers, which makes sense. When the state started this 4 or 5 years ago, we were 100 and some, but because they've been helping other districts ahead of us, we're inching up, so.
This is the thing that we tried last year. and
We try every year. But this year, it looks like, there's only 40 some million dollars ahead of us that could be if everybody takes it ahead of us, it's 40 some million, and that 50 million earmark, 49 million earmarked for this grant. So seemed like it's, unless I'm missing something, but it would be great. It would be such a huge relief. Because, and here's the bigger picture, and I put this in my notes too. The bigger picture is it's really hard to attract business to our area because of our tax rate. Because if you have $1 million building shop that you have to pay taxes on, you're looking at $70,000 of taxes before you even sell anything or make anything. That's a lot to make up for right off the top. So to attract businesses and lower that rate would be very helpful. And then when you get more businesses in, they pay taxes, and homeowners then spread that educational cost across more tax bodies. It just perpetuates a positive tax environment. So, hopefully, we shall see.
Silver lining.
When will we find out?
Oh,
When will we find out?
That's a good question. That's due today,
Okay.
and I already applied.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's good.
Russ? Future agenda items. Board policies, again, state house. And we've got the one addition that John put in. Any other additions to the future agenda?
Can we just speak a little bit to the waiving of the state holidays? I don't know if I'm familiar with that. What are we considering, or what are we gonna talk about?
So in order to have school on Veterans Day, for example, which we have over the last half a dozen years, maybe,
Okay.
we're supposed to every so many years, some of them are every 3 years, some of them are every year. We're supposed to waive those holidays to have school because it's an official statement.
Okay. So we're saying, potentially saying what, that classes will be in session on these days?
Yeah.
Okay.
which for most of them, they have been in the last few years in session on these days. It's just, I don't know if we've done the waiver every year, but we're supposed to. I know we haven't fast.
I don't recall. Okay.
Just want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do.
Is Lincoln's birthday separate from President's Day?
Yes, Lincoln's birthday, we've always had school on ever since I've been in Illinois. Every school district has, because it's a Wednesday or, you know, it's a moving target. But we've always had President's Day off. Sometimes they align.
Superintendent's report.
Right, if you notice, over in the corner, when you leave, go check out the, mural that's painted on the story corner. It is in honor of Meredith Frediani. Very cool. So, check it out. Her family is here painting it today, helping Keiko Johnson commission Keiko Johnson to create the mural on their birth. Martin Luther King breakfast next Monday at 8:30.
8:00.
8:00. 8 to 9.
The invitation's at 8:00.
8 o'clock. So if you're so inclined to come, we can welcome you here. Please sign up so we know how many people are coming.
What's the current count of that?
104.
Okay, good.
Good luck. We're trying it on the holiday this year to see if get some more kids and parents involved without having to scramble and get the kids up and out of the house earlier in the morning. It'd be kind of a big challenge. Just continuing to talk about the assistant principal process at the middle school with Ms. Parrish resigning and ending her time this week. That we are looking at resumes, but we're also looking at other options to fill in for the remainder of this year. And maybe start interviewing them for next year later on. We've gotten a couple of at least on paper, potential quality candidates, but we shall see. We don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. And having some, we also don't want to take from another school district in the middle of the year and put them in a pinch. And we're looking at, by the time we go through the hiring process, if we follow, and we should, our typical hiring process, which takes a good month and a half in time. We're looking at, starting in January with interviews and then getting into probably a February approval, start March 1st, then you've got a few weeks onboarding and spring break. We're really not going to get much out of that experience for this year unless we find somebody that's awesome, and then we look at it as a jump start for next year. But in the meantime, I think we need to prepare for some interim possibilities of moving people around in the district and in the code to cover some of that workload. It's a lot. We're going to take a step back in some of what we're hoping to accomplish as far as goals this year, but we will do it.
Is this a recent hire? From,
Way
oh, so not that long.
we'll keep plugging along. That's it.
Thank you. Carly, what you got for us?
Mine's pretty short and sweet. Property tax revenue, so our 21-22 property taxes, we've received just over 98%. Which around this time is typically where we get, last year, by mid-December, we're at, 97.82%. So this year, we're seeing a little bit more, property tax revenue come in. We typically get one, maybe two more payments between January, February. So we'll be getting at least one more payment, which will just up that 98.58% a little bit more, which is good. Audit update. So this year was a little bit different. Typically, we do our audit in July. Our auditor conducted the audit in September this year. So we're still waiting for final audit information from the auditor. I have a question out to them when they'll be able to come and present the audits to the board. I'm hoping that it's sometime in February or March. I'm hoping by the next board meeting, I'll have a more definite date for you. And then the 5-year budget projection, I started working with Forecast 5, so that's our projecting software, right before winter break, to work on the budget projection for next year. We're kind of sidelined with a little bit of a data issue, so we have to clean up some data in terms of our account code structure. So I'll be meeting with him next week to continue working on that. And so once we're able to clean up that data, get it into the system, I will be reviewing a 5-year budget projection with you at an upcoming board meeting. And that's it.
Thank you, Connie. Question? Do we have any board reports? Okay, make a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of number one, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body, or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of a public body, or against legal counsel for the public body, to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. As well as number 11, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Dahl? Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Mr. Guzio?
Here.
Mr. Lorenzo?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here, yes.
Mr. Federer? Ms. Roberts? The board entered into closed session.
Thank you all. And for those online, when we return, we're just going to close the session. We won't take any action.